Chapter 11 The Case of the Creepy Classroom. As soon as the morning bell rang, I leaped out of my sleeping hut because I wanted to make sure Phoebe found the watch and the MKC notice. While I was waiting for her to arrive, Thomas came in and tapped just Joey on the shoulder. He had a big friendly smile and said, "Hey Joey, want to shoot some hoops after school?" Joey looked surprised. He didn't smile at all. "I'm busy," he said. "Maybe tomorrow?" Thomas asked. Joey shook his head. "I don't think so." And then he walked away. Thomas wasn't smiling anymore. I think Thomas is a nice boy. I know for a fact that Joey is a nice boy. But I didn't think Joey was being very nice to Thomas. "What's going on, Og?" I asked my froggy friend. "Boing, boing," he replied. "I'm not sure I want any more mysteries to solve," I squeaked. Og dived into the water and splashed around. Just then, Phoebe came into the classroom and went straight to her table. "Over here, Phoebe!" I squeaked at the top of my lungs. She didn't pay any attention, so I jumped up and down. "Phoebe!" I screamed. "Over here!" She still didn't respond, so I climbed up to the top of my cage. "Will somebody please tell Phoebe to come over here?" I shrieked. I heard Rosie giggle. "Look at Humphrey! He's acting silly!" She rolled her wheelchair over to the table for a closer look. Simon, Joey, and Kelsey rushed over. "Phoebe, come see Humphrey," Kelsey said. Thank goodness. Finally, Phoebe came over too. Since an audience had gathered around me, I decided to give them a show. Clinging to the top bars of my cage, I made my way, paw over paw, across to the other side. "Go, Humphrey, go!" Simon cheered me on. "Where's he going anyway?" Rosie asked. I knew exactly where I was going, to the side of my cage near Phoebe's watch and the MKC paper. I took a deep breath and I dropped down into the soft bedding. I did a double flip-flop. I hadn't planned on it, but my friends all said, "Ooh." I looked over at the watch and the paper, crossed my paws, and hoped. "Hey, Phoebe, isn't this your watch?" Kelsey asked. Phoebe stared at the watch. "It is!" She picked it up. "But I looked here yesterday. How did I miss it?" "Maybe the custodian found it," Rose suggested. Phoebe put on her watch and smiled. I crossed my paws tighter. Kelsey picked up the MKC notice. "It was sitting on this," she said. She handed the paper to Phoebe, who stared at it and stared some more. The bell rang, and the students all headed for their chairs. Phoebe slipped the paper into her pocket. It worked. I could finally uncross my paws. Phoebe had her watch back, and maybe she'd call that number for MKC. I was proud of myself, but my joy didn't last long, because when I looked over at Thomas, he was staring at his desk and looking about as unhappy as a human could look. "Class, get ready for a ton of fun," Mr. E announced. I wasn't in the mood for fun, so I crawled into my sleeping hut and had a nice dream about Phoebe's daisy watch. When I awoke, I thought I was having a bad dream. In fact, I thought I was having a nightmare. There were ghosts hanging from the ceiling. There were witches and broomsticks and black cats flying above the bulletin board. And there were leering pumpkins of every shape and size pinned on the board. "Eek!" I squeaked. I don't think anybody heard me. "I'll bet this is the best decorated room in all of Longfellow School," Mr. E told my friends. To speak the truth, he was probably right, but I didn't think looking at those hideous grinning pumpkin faces and guess that goes all night long would be the best for me. "And don't forget, there'll be a costume party on Halloween next week," Mr. E reminded the class. "Eek!" I squeaked again. As if my paws weren't already full of problems, now I had to come up with a costume. Humans just don't realize how much a classroom hamster has to do. After school, Mr. Morales came into the classroom. "Nice decorations, Ed," he said. Mr. E looked very proud. Mr. Morales took a piece of paper out of his pocket. "Have you got a moment?" "Sure," Mr. E said. The two men sat in some student chairs. Grown-up humans always look funny sitting in those small chairs. "How have things been going with the class?" the principal asked. "Great," Mr. E said. "The kids are the best." Mr. Morales nodded. "Yes, and I can tell they like you a lot." Mr. E smiled, and I think his red hair glowed a little brighter. "But there have been a few problems," Mr. Morales continued. "Yes, there have," I squeaked. "Problems like Phoebe, Harry, Kelsey, Ryman, Simon, Rosie, Holly, and Thomas." I know all the principal heard was squeak, 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 and it made him laugh. "Yes, Humphrey, I know you're listening," he said. Mr. E cleared his throat. What problems. The principal looked down at the paper. Well, Mrs. Wright has complained about some safety issues, some injuries, a problem with noise, and a problem with students roaming the halls during class. Oh, Mr. E said, I guess Mrs. Wright and I don't see eye to eye. Mr. Morales smiled. Mrs. Wright does like to follow the rules, but the rules are there for a reason after all. Mr. E nodded nervously. Yes, I understand. If he understood, why didn't he follow them? That was part of the mystery of Mr. E. And a few parents have called to say that they're concerned about a lack of homework, Mr. Morales continued. Mr. E chuckled. I bet the students haven't complained about that. No, Miss Principal Morales replied, but we're here to teach the children. I believe that learning is fun, but there's work involved too. Mr. E nodded, and nodded some more. He looked so nervous, even his red hair looked pale. And then there's Mrs. Brisbane. Mr. Morales wasn't smiling anymore. She's wondering if you're keeping up with her lesson plans. She said you haven't called her with questions. Oh, Mr. E said. Well, I've been following the lesson plans, but adding my own touches. Maybe I haven't been following them closely enough. At least Mr. E was honest. I liked that about him. The district-wide math test is coming up. Are the students prepared for that? Mr. Morales asked. Not completely, Mr. E said. Not yet. Ed, I want to give you a chance. You're a new teacher, and I know that you really want to continue, Mr. Morales said. But the learning comes first. It certainly does, I squeaked. Boing, 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 Og agreed. Are you letting me go? Mr. E asked. No, Ed, Mr. Morales said. I think you can be a good teacher, but I need to see change, starting tomorrow. Yes, I'll change, Mr. E said. Thank you for giving me another chance. I won't let you down. The two men shook hands, and Mr. Morales left. We'll pick it up here again on Monday.